that was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
Well, here we are again, at the ending stages of one of the most controversial seasons. While perhaps the episodes in itself led audiences to be really disappointed, there is a silver lining to all of this. Given that you probably read the title before clicking this, then you know that Nehellenia has already won Global All-Stars, regardless of what happens next week at the finale. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the journey of Nehellenia, a humble queen from DragRace Italy Season 2 that went on to have such a trajectory that resulted in her being the main topic of conversation in the Drag Race world for several months. But before we get into it, this is an important message to please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because we're almost at 100,000. Follow me on Twitter at GreenGayYT, and follow my brand new Instagram and TikTok at It's GreenGay. Also, make sure to give this video a like and comment below. Now, let's begin. If we're being honest, most of the international queens succeed in making a name for themselves within their home countries. But unless they end up competing on a Versus the World or any platform where they'll get exposed to more of the main audience, it's difficult to ever see most of them last in the main discussions of the fanbase. That's why upon getting invited to Global All-Stars, Nehellenia now had an opportunity to really shift things in her life. But with the way that everything ended up panning out, it was like if any queen came out of this season winning, it really is her. Chances are, if you're watching this, that you haven't actually watched Nehellenia's original season, which I don't blame you. It seems that it's common for most of the general fan base to not tune into the editions that are either not hosted by RuPaul or are in a completely different language requiring them to read subtitles. To each their own, but given that I'm a Drag Race YouTuber, I do get a sense of responsibility to try and keep up with everything. That's why seeing Nehellenia get chosen to be the first and only representative thus far of the Italian franchise to compete in front of none other than RuPaul was an awesome choice. Yet, not all that surprising. Let me explain. One of the main contrasts between the final edit she gets on her original season versus Global All-Stars is that in her home country, Nehellenia was a much more vibrant personality than we'd go on to see on Global. What I mean by this is that you can tell she was a lot more carefree, constantly playing to the cameras, fooling around with the other girls, pretty much being in her element. The only real quote-unquote weakness was that she was on the more emotional side, crying frequently and second-guessing herself. Yet all that was contrasted by her actually succeeding in most of the challenges, never landing in the bottom two, and even encouraging other queens that were having a way more difficult time than her. Although part of what made Nehellenia such a great personality, especially in the beginning stages of her original season, was that along with being more vibrant, she also felt comfortable enough to make jokes about her fellow queens, essentially being a lot shadier than we saw on Global. Don't get me wrong, most of her personality is that lovable, cute-esque aesthetic, but you were guaranteed that at least at one point in each episode, she would throw a little shady joke at some other queen. Obviously, this was just her being a playful drag queen, yet the reason I bring this up is because on Global All-Stars, she'd pretty much barely, if ever, showed that side of her. Yeah, we'll dive deeper into that later on in this video. On October 20th, 2022, Drag Race Italy Season 2 began airing. It was an 8-episode long edition with no cash prize, and instead they had the opportunity to become an ambassador for MAC Cosmetics. Naturally, non-English speaking franchises tend to be a lot more lower budget. Not just that, but Italy as a country is a pretty tough place to be a member of the LGBT community. They're actually a lot more conservative there. Even when season 1 started getting marketed in their country, there was some pushback from audiences who didn't want the series to be aired on national television. Subsequently, that made Italy an important place to have a franchise like Drag Race. So heading into their second season, it was even more of a statement to introduce a new set of drag queen personalities to the world, one of them being Nehellenia. Nehellenia named herself after a Sailor Moon character that's the villain of season 4. Despite that, she described her drag persona as the complete opposite, being a very kind person that focuses on cutesy aesthetics, drawing inspirations from animes. Although what she'd go on to find out is that the judges considered her to be a comedy queen, despite the fact that Nelly had never described herself in that way at any point in her career. Granted, she would go on to do well in a lot of the comedy challenges, but it seems from the way she spoke that in a sense, being labeled a comedy queen was as if she was being put in a box. Yet in a way, it also made sense. Nelly was one of the biggest personalities of the group. I'm not sure if she's ever had experience in television before, but it seemed as if she knew exactly what production and the show as a whole was expecting out of her. I'd go as far as to say she was super confident in the early stages of the competition, at least from a viewer perspective. If anything, the only rivalry that Nehellenia goes on to have is with Obama. No, not President Obama. We're talking about the icon Obama, one of the contestants on the season with her. Obama is actually one of my favorite queens from Italia. I know this video is not about her, but I'd love to see her compete on a Versus the World season, because I just felt she was underappreciated by the Italian judges. But anyways, Obama gets labeled by most of the other girls the villain of the season, including Nehellenia that had a more frenemy relationship with her, even calling out Obama as trying to be extra in order for production to view her as a valuable asset to the series rather than relying on her own talent. Which yes, I was gagged when Nelly said that, because something about seeing this cute little Italian queen occasionally throw out the most cutting shady remarks is just so contradictory that it makes you love her even more. It's no secret that international queens often face different standards when competing in their respective franchises. Just because they're judged from someone from their country doesn't mean they're gonna understand everything that a queen is trying to showcase. If anything, queens like Jimbo were much better appreciated under RuPaul's judging because Ru gravitated a lot more to her approach to drag than, let's say, Brooklyn. Part of competing is the luck of just connecting at a personal level with the judges. I noticed, for example, with Obama's run, they made critiques to her that she relied too much on her legs when presenting her looks on the runway, leading to Obama to say in Untucked that it's the judges who choose to focus on her legs rather than appreciating the rest of what she brings. If anything, it was like they were telling her that her long legs were a hindrance, something that if RuPaul saw, would literally celebrate her for. But anyways, as the season went on, there was a lot of times that Nelly was among the most polished looks on the runway. One thing that's unique about Drag Race Italy is that while the contestants are doing their runway walks, the judges will give out their comments. But unlike most franchises where the comments tend to be jokes about a contestant's outfits leaning more on the positive side, in Italy, they literally start reading your outfit to filth while you're walking it, with some of the judges straight up calling out that they don't get how a certain outfit fits the theme, while the queen is right there hearing everything. I'm not gonna lie, it made the runways even more entertaining to me. So then, if runways weren't a problem, how exactly does Nelly do when it came to the challenges? Well, by the time we get to episode 5, Nelly did not have a single maxi challenge win. She did have a couple mini challenge wins under her belt, but I mean, nobody really counts those as impressive, unless it's something iconic like a reading challenge. Therefore, the fact that this episode's challenge was the Rusical was her chance of succeeding, since she's actually a pretty good performer. For context, the Rusical ended up being a tribute to Lady Gaga's career, each of them getting assigned a different era, Nelly getting the Chromatica one. This musical is pretty impressive because while clearly being a lower budget production, they managed to create something that provided an actual coherent presentation, one where Nelly was able to absolutely flourish. In fact, the judges tell her how great of a voice she has, along with eating up the runway with her look that was among the top contenders. Yet despite this, very bewilderingly, by the end of the episode, as the judges start calling out the queens who are safe to step to the back of the stage, the last two queens standing are Nehellenia and La Petite Noire, which came as a complete shock to everyone. Nelly even has a mini confrontation with the host, telling Priscilla that if she goes home tonight, it's gonna be a huge disappointment for her. But in a last minute twist, Priscilla reveals that they will in fact be lip syncing, but it's to decide which of the two is the winner of this week's challenge, because they were both the best. Meaning that yes, this was a non-elimination episode, and they just wanted to play with the hearts of both the viewers and the queens on set. They lip synced to Rhythm of the Night by Corona. They both do a pretty good job. I mean, Nelly had the benefit of wearing a neon wig, allowing her to stand out more, but Petite Noire quickly overcame her by doing a bunch of tricks, which yes, doesn't always win it, but with an energetic song like this, it fit right in. Nelly also ends up breaking her heel in the process and assumes that that's the reason why she would end up losing the episode. So by the time we start episode 6, Nelly had been among the top 3 of the challenges on 3 separate occasions, but didn't end up winning anything. That's why it's the makeover challenge that becomes her highest moment in the competition. She ends up naming her partner Fantasia, a reference to a villain in season 5 of Sailor Moon. Each of the queens would also have to represent a sport. Some chose soccer or football, but Nelly chose fencing, officially resulting in her finally winning her first challenge. But here's the best part of all. Her prize for winning the challenge was a very expensive mannequin for her to make outfits on. Only it was a much smaller waist size than she was. But it's really expensive, so she can always sell it online. As we head into the finale of season 2, Nelly, while she did make it into the top 4, was pretty much tied when it came to who'd be considered the second most likely player to win, because holding the number 1 spot was a queen named La Diamond, who went into the finale with a total of 4 challenge wins, ultimately ending up winning the whole season. To be fair though, Nelly, while a lot further behind with just 1 win, was pretty much the only other queen that you could really seek at the crown. Granted, her track record wasn't the best, but still, in many aspects, she was one of the narrators of the season. Plus, if we consider the fact that Drag Race Italy season 1 had the first ever winner of the franchise to never have even won a single challenge, it was pretty much anyone's game at this point. In the finale, the top 4 queens do one last music video challenge, but ultimately, one of them is eliminated before the final lip sync. That queen being La Petite Noire, who officially places 4th. Nelly then advances to the top 3. But before they continue, they decide to announce the winner of Miss Congeniality, and Nehellenia ends up winning, which sort of made it like she was getting her own little celebration moment too. Regardless, on December 8th, 2022, the season finale of Drag Race Italy Season 2 aired, and Nehellenia had officially lost the crown, becoming a runner-up for the season. When it came to insights into Nelly's drag career on the season, she only really touches on the fact that for a while, she distanced herself from her dad, ultimately realizing that she was just wasting time, so they ended up becoming very close in recent years. It made me wonder a lot about her story when it came to those initial stages of her drag career, so comment below if you'd like to see Nelly be a guest on my channel, so we can dive deeper into her career. Regardless, given all the context behind her run on Drag Race Italia, it's not so much of a surprise that production went with choosing her to be the sole Italian representative, because even looking at her runway package for Italia Season 2, she was among the best, only really being outshined occasionally by the other queens that made the finale alongside with her. This time around though, while she would in fact make it to the end of the competition, it wasn't anywhere near the type of competitive environment she had grown accustomed to in Italy. Nehellenia starts off Global All-Stars directly as an underdog. If anything, Nelly sort of puts herself in that box from the get-go. The moment I'm specifically talking about is shortly after Nelly is among the first half of queens that gets to just sit out and watch as the other half of the competitors do their talent show. She comes out of it saying that after seeing what everyone brought, she's a little bit nervous about how her talent show is going to be received. This was the first time, at least since the season started, that we saw one of the queens really show their vulnerability. Regardless, for her to voice that to the cameras meant that she could be in jeopardy of getting in her head, ultimately not delivering well. It's what made me scared for her in the moment, thinking she'd end up being one of the early outs because of it. But boy was I ever wrong. The outcry of love towards Nehellenia is one of those few moments where you really see a queen spark something within the fanbase. What made it even better was just how organic it was. I mean, this was a contestant that most audiences weren't aware of, but here they were online defending her as if their lives depended on it. It also seemed that most of the diehard viewers had decided that since they hated the favoritism the judges had towards the Rue girls, that part of their love towards Nehellenia would be used as fuel to attack the other queens. Episode 4 was the girl group challenge, where the queens needed to write verses to their respective songs. Something that made this challenge special on the season is that RuPaul provided an easier avenue for some of the international queens by allowing them the option to write their verses in whatever language they wanted. This was an amazing idea from production side. Unfortunately, while Nehellenia did choose to have a portion of her verse in Italian, the top 3 consisted of her and another 2 queens who did theirs in complete English. This felt like a missed opportunity since giving Nelly the win would have been quite the statement, to reward her not just for delivering a great verse, proving that it's easy for viewers to still relate to a queen's message even if they have to rely on reading a subtitle. She had also displayed one of the best runway looks from the episode. Regardless, it's the fight that happens in Untucked that elevates things even further. If you're not someone that frequently goes online for the fan discussions, in summary, Nelly's been having to call out the fanbase for sending hate to other queens just because of what transpired during filming. Yet her first statement came after the airing of episode 4, where her confrontation against queens, especially Alyssa, for having looked over her when it came to being a threat in the competition, resulted in many of them walking out of the Untucked room altogether. The only thing is, most of the audience would end up siding with Nelly, and the lack of people that had her back from what we see in the edit only reinforced many people's support towards her. And rightfully so. I mean, it's always enjoyable to see an underdog be able to prove their competitors wrong. That's why what came as a baffling decision was that clearly as a production member, you'd think that after all these queens pretty much got pissed at Nelly during Untucked, entirely because she said that everyone was underestimating her, that production would have advised Rue through her headpiece that if Nelly wins, it would agitate the rest of the queens who seemed to not have a lot of patience with her. But instead, they gave the win to Kitty Scott Claus, only reinforcing the idea that Nelly was still an underdog in the competition. But would she be able to get the last laugh? Nelly's runway package this time around was a perfect evolution from just over a year ago when she competed on Drag Race Italia. She's been posting a lot of stories behind each of the looks on social media, signifying that there was a lot of thought put into what she'd be showcasing on the main stage. Yet one thing's for sure, after the airing of episode 4, it'd be quite the rocky ride for anybody that wasn't Nehellenia, at least in terms of fan reception. As the competition goes on, Nelly ends up making it to the top 5 of the season alongside Kitty Scott Claus, Alyssa Edwards, Queen Kong, and Tessa Testicle. At this point, she only had one challenge win being the makeover. But even then, it feels like Nelly was actively the underdog out of all the queens, with constant jokes being made by queens like Kitty that she's actually not a threat to any of the girls. It sort of made me wonder why Nelly didn't clap back as many times throughout the season to them. Because after all, she showed in her original season that she had enough of a wit to be able to volley with someone, especially when it came to shady remarks. One could argue that this was because in Italy, she was able to speak in her first language, along with being with queens that were just as unknown as her. But on Global, not only did she have to speak in English, she also was in a weird spot since most of the queens didn't know who each of them were. Aside from the more popular ones like Alyssa Edwards, Kitty Scott Claus, Queen Kong, and arguably Pythia too, there was probably a degree of her which felt she wasn't worthy enough yet to speak up. At least that's what I think I'd feel if I was in her situation. You'd have to be super careful, because to go after a fan favorite like Alyssa is probably not going to be the best way to get the audience to like you. Little did she know, it'd be quite the opposite. As for the rest of the queens that weren't Rue girls, they were left trying to fight for the spotlight so that they could have enough time on TV to be able to build a fan base. Although it didn't really matter though. While there is probably more to what transpired behind the scenes with Queens on Global All-Stars, under this production, Nelly ended up going the route of being a lovable underdog. It would be cool if Nehellenia's well reception by people allows the Italian franchise to get renewed for a 4th season. Apparently, after season 3, the show was doing pretty well in terms of viewership. But what's created obstacles are some network executives who straight up don't like the show due to how it celebrates queer art. So hopefully they're able to get past that and give us another season. Maybe even having Nehellenia be part of the judging panel. It could actually make it so that the 4th season becomes their biggest one yet. At the time of making this video, the second to last episode of Global All-Stars is about to air, which is the Lip Sync Smackdown. Next week, we'll find out which of the top 4 queens will get the crown. But regardless of what happens, Nehellenia has already won. For example, at DragCon UK 2025, which is happening in January 2025, she's probably going to be able to experience super long lines of people wanting to meet and support her. Something that would have been hard to achieve had she never been on Global. With that, she's established a legacy for herself. And I honestly can't wait to see how her career evolves in the next couple of years. Yeah, one thing's for sure, none of us are ever going to forget the way the fanbase rallied around her during the airing of Global All-Stars. I want to take a moment to thank my patrons. In the Elite Pink Squad, we have Matthew Burns, Gay Uncle, Sari Tish, Natasha De Leon, Las Pothitas, and Cool Galnan. And in the Green Squad, we have Cayman Rider Furry, Edgar Allan Pup, The Only Sean, IJS, Jack Beck, Not a Punch But a Keek, Captain Chaos, Bashir with the good beard, Galeria Gomez, Dea, Sarah G, Scarlet Rose, Boiled Peanut, Kimberly Marin, Max Whale, and Olivia Marr. If you'd like to see your name on the screen, you can support me on Patreon. The link will be in the description. Thank you so much for watching this week's video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitter at GreenGayYT, and I'll see you guys next time.